Before I begin, I just want to say that from the 3 courses, mine is at the earliest stages because I've just started collecting my data a few weeks ago. So all of this is work in progress, and I'm still a bit insecure about how things are going to develop in the future. But just to give you a bit of background how this came to being really, I did a study as part of my master's last year into secondary school students' perceptions of support, and those were children who had recently arrived in the country with very limited language knowledge, who were taking extensive support at school. And one of the main findings that came out of this was that students were often very passive recipients of support. They would do what they're asked to do, they would advance with the language, but they will not be active in that process. They will not take their learning further on their own unless they're told to do so. So I thought that this was also stemming in a way from a little bit of a deficit perspective on the part of teachers who were always focusing on boosting the language, really to give them the opportunity to actually understand what's happening in class. And that made me sort of think about students' engagement and students as active participants in their education. And I have focused my research on transition from primary to secondary education to sort of find out how children manage not only the difficulties that they experience with learning and language, but also how they manage that in different types of contexts. Because in primary school, they spend most of the time with one teacher, if not all of the time, in a smaller class, in the same classroom, where all their friends are. And in a secondary school, they're all in different forms, lots of teachers, a lot more structured learning, and higher expectation tests and all these things. So I really wanted to find out how students engage in that change of learning environment, and I wanted to find this out through their own voices. I wanted to tell their own stories. And of course there are certain difficulties with this, as most of these children's language is not up to a level when they can freely express themselves, so they're limited in what they can say. So in terms of this, I have had to think about creative ways to explore their views and to reach them and to find other ways to speak to them, not relying fully on the English language. But just before I move to my methods, I'll just say a little bit about the school. The school is in Manchester, and it's a very diverse school, which is not unusual for the inner city schools in that area. The percentage of children speaking English as an additional language is above 90 for the whole school. And by English as an additional language, I mean bilingual children who speak other languages at home on a daily basis. Some of the children have been born in the country, others have migrated at different stages, and in this particular school, more than 3/3 have come to the school after the normal starting time, so between year 1 and year 6. And these are really the children that I'm focusing on in my project. The school has got very high percentage of children on free school meals, which is a sort of measure for socioeconomic deprivation, and above average numbers for children with special educational needs. So it is a very challenging environment in a way, and then in addition to this, they've had a bit of difficulties of recruiting permanent staff, so there are challenges on the part of having teachers to stay for more than 1 or 2 years and get the students through their whole education. In terms of my sample, I'm following 20 students, which is an entire class, currently at the school there are 2 year 6 classes. I'm only working with one of them, and you might think that 20 students is quite a lot, but that's in a way that's compensating if any of my secondary schools opt out. I will still have a sample to work with and to produce findings in my research. And with the changes in policy and requirements for schools, there is quite a high chance that one of the secondary schools might say in September, you know what, you can't really come and do your research here. So I had to think about this one. In terms of the schools, traditionally children from this primary school, they go to 4 different secondary schools, but I'm currently focusing on 3 of the schools as that's where my sample will go. And it's a variety. One is an academy, which was opened a few years ago. It was an underperforming school that was assessed as unsatisfactory. It was closed down, and a new academy was built with new teachers and new management team. Then the other school is an all-girls school, and the third school is an arts college. In terms of my sample, I've got quite a majority of Somali students, but there is a range of backgrounds really. There is a Chinese student, Kazakh student, a few students from Southern Asia, so it's a mix. And what I'm currently doing is observations in the primary school. I spend 2 or 3 days a week, the whole day, observing the children in the lessons, and then break time at lunchtime to really see how they interact with each other in different types of settings. And I spend a lot of time talking to them in a very informal way to sort of build a relationship with them, and to enable them to see me. I don't want to say as a friend, but as someone who's not a teacher, because at the moment they're convinced that I work with one of the secondary schools and they think I'm a teacher, but we're working on this. And so I'm using observations. I have to put the observations on my poster because I don't think that's very creative in a way. But in terms of my creative methods that I'm using paired discussions, because some of the children, they've worked out a strategy of translating for each other, sort of the ones who are more confident with translating lessons. So I'm using that as a resource to enable them to speak to me, and it has worked quite well in the past. I'm using learning walks, which I heard of as part of a project I used to work with, which is basically asking the children to take me on a tour around the school and to show me where they like being, where they don't like being, and sort of use the environment as prompts. And it's been working really in terms of seeing a display, seeing the pictures of their friends that would prompt them to talk about their friends, about things they've done, outings they've gone to. And I'm doing this currently in the primary school, and I would like to see how their sort of engagement with it and portrayal of the school and their learning will change as they go in secondary school. So I'll be doing the exactly same thing in secondary school, and I'll try to do that in sort of the first 2 weeks to see how that will change. And I think it will be very different, as now all of them are really scared of going into secondary school. They've been to the school once or twice. They've seen a massive building, lots of classrooms, lots of older children, and they're absolutely terrified. They keep saying that they don't want to go to secondary school. They like primary school. They're at the top of the school. They don't want to go somewhere where there will be the little fishes and everyone will be pushing them about. So I think that will be interesting to sort of see how it will change, like, because they've got this ownership of their primary school now, and they will not have this in September when they go to the big school. I'm also, in order to reflect on what they're saying in the learning walks, I'm using interviews with pictures, and I've got a few of the pictures that I'm using on my poster, and that's really asking them at different times of the school day to sort of tell me. For example, I would say, well, right, if this was your classroom, and if I just enter on a day that I'm not normally here, which one of these blocks would you be? What would you be doing? Would that be different in different subjects? Just to sort of see how they view themselves, and then I can compare this with my own observations, because some of them, they want to be these sort of upfront people talking, but they're actually really quiet in the class, and I think that in a way enables them to reflect on how they would like to be, or what they used to be in the schools in their own country before they moved to England. And then I've given them cameras to take pictures of the school, and specifically pictures of the places that they like most about the school. And we'll be talking about these pictures, and these pictures will form part of their learning journals, which not all of them will be keeping learning journals, but I'll ask probably half of them to keep one where they would be allowed to take complete ownership of this, but that's just to have an artifact of the process of their transition. They can write about their experience, about their worries, they can draw, they can put pictures, and then I will be analysing this sort of after I finish my fieldwork in the secondary school. In terms of analysis, I'll be using Bourdieu's work, and specifically the concepts of habitus, capital, and the field. And I think it's very interesting the way these children's habitus is structured, because it does consist of their past and present experiences, and usually these are experiences from different cultural contexts, and that interacts with a completely new field, and that makes them act in some ways which might not be explicitly understood by teachers, who might wonder, well, why are these children doing that, and why are they not doing this? As I said, my theoretical framework is a bit of a mess now. I'm really trying to make sense, and Bourdieu is not the easiest person to work with. But it's really looking at their dispositions as well, and I've sort of thought of their dispositions as coping strategies, and how, when they leave the primary school, how they develop coping strategies in that new, completely different environment. And I think that's quite interesting, considering that these are children who have made a number of transitions, different transitions between different learning contexts across countries. And in terms of expected findings and outcomes, I'm hoping that the learning journals would be something that the school could really carry on doing, because they also have some trouble with their transition work at the moment because of missing stuff and so on. So I'm really developing this with the class teacher as to something that children could work on even when I'm not there, because I'm going there in my own time. I have all the time in the day to sit down and be like, right, what do you want to talk about? Well, if I'm not there, I just want them to be able to take that work further. And then I hope that by providing sort of in-depth views of the children, of their transition, this will enable teachers and schools to really provide better opportunities for children to adapt and to make that transition more easily.